What happened today in Georgia, what's still happening into the night tonight in Georgia, is something that everybody saw coming from multiple vantage points, even just in the immediate past. In that 2018 governor's race in Georgia, you may recall that Democrat Stacey Abrams narrowly lost to a Republican named Brian Kemp. Brian Kemp's previous job had been Secretary of State in Georgia, which meant he was in charge of administering that election in which he himself was running for governor. He did not recuse himself from administering that election, even though he was the candidate at the top of the ticket. Part of the way he prepared the ground in Georgia for himself in that election was that he kicked more than 500,000 people off the voter rolls in Georgia in the year ahead of that general election, which was absolutely unprecedented in modern times in that state. On Election Day in 2018, with 500,000+ people having been kicked off the rolls, it was a total breakdown and total dysfunction at the polls. It led to such a debacle of an election day that it made nationwide headlines even on a day when lots else was going on. It was such a debacle that Democrat, Stacey Abrams, would not concede that she had lost that race fairly. And many Democrats still don't believe she did. That was 2018. That was the last major election in Georgia. Then in advance of this election today in Georgia, you could also see today's disaster coming. When the new Republican Secretary of State, the guy who replaced Brian Kemp when Brian Kemp became governor, the new Republican Secretary of State decided to make what even the local hometown press in Georgia considered to be a very high-stakes bet. Kind of an experiment, little wager here. Here goes nothing. Great leap for the state. An electronic voting machine company hired Brian Kemp's former campaign manager to be its lobbyist. And then the Brian Kemp administration in Georgia hired that company to replace all of the voting machines in every city, town, and county in Georgia, all in record time, literally record time. The state had this board of evaluators that was looking at the various companies who were trying to get that voting machine contract. This board of evaluators looked at the different bids from the different companies and what they were offering. They did not pick the company that Georgia ultimately went with. They picked a different company altogether. But nope. The state administration instead decided they would go with the company that Brian Kemp's campaign manager was the lobbyist for. The company had never had a job this big ever. In fact, there has never been a bigger job in U.S. election history. As the Atlanta Journal-Constitution pointed out last November, what Georgia was trying to roll out here was the largest and fastest rollout of elections equipment in U.S. history. This company had never had anything of this size. The company had never installed so much equipment at once and on such a time schedule. Georgia was trying to do the impossible. I mean, something that everybody knew at the time was impossible. 30,000 brand new voting machines of a type that hadn't been used in the state for 7 million voters, more than 2,600 precincts, all at once, all in a matter of months in a state where voting was already an apparently deliberate disaster. And that's what they set out to do. And now today, that disastrous bet has paid off. Not a surprise. This was the absolutely foreseeable headline in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution tonight. Quote, new voting machines lead to lines and problems on Georgia Election Day. Yeah, you think? Quote, problems with Georgia's new voting computers plagued the state's primary election today, leading to lines and voters leaving without casting their ballots. Poll workers said they had difficulties turning on the voter check-in computers and encoding voter access cards and installing touchscreens. Voters waited in lines for hours at various precincts across Cobb and DeKalb and Fulton and Gwinnett counties. A precinct manager at Cross Keys High, where voting had essentially shut down Tuesday morning, said he couldn't use the voter check-in computers. Quote, the touchpads aren't receiving or accepting the authorizations, and we're out of provisional ballots. There's nothing we can do. People queued in that high school parking lot there for hours, but essentially that voting location shut down. DeKalb County Commissioner Marita Davis Johnson told the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, quote, even the poll workers don't know what to do. These are new machines, and you expect people to run them in less than a couple of months? If this is a preview of November, then we are in trouble. If this is a preview of November, we are in trouble. Well, you know, it depends on your perspective, I suppose.